Hi, first graders. It's Miss Lassard, and I'm here to do our last part of A New Nation, American Independence, all about the Revolutionary War. So this is going to be a two-part lesson. The first part is going to go over some famous Americans of the Revolution, and then the second part will be all about how the war ends. So the first American that we're going to talk about is someone named Salem Poor. So Salem Poor began the revolution as a slave and ended the war as a hero. He was born a slave, and after years, he saved enough money to free himself. Once he was free, he enlisted in the army and fought in numerous battles. His heroic acts in battle impressed fellow soldiers, and he was recognized for his bravery in the General Court of Massachusetts. George Washington. General George Washington seemed to be the perfect choice to lead the army. He had fought to protect the colonies before, and he knew how the British fought. Dressed in his military uniform at the Continental Congress, he was respected by everyone and was easily elected as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Washington set off to join troops from across the colonies in Massachusetts, ready to meet the British in battle. Because George did such an amazing job leading the Patriot soldiers, he was the perfect choice for the first leader of America. George Washington is considered the father of our country and is seen on the quarter and the dollar bill. If any of you have held a dollar bill or a quarter or seen them at school, the face on it is George Washington. Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, who was born in the colony of Massachusetts, that's where we live, and then lived in the colony of Pennsylvania, had actually moved to London, England for a few years. He had gone there to speak out in Parliament against the unfair taxing of the American colonies and the fact that the Americans had no say in Parliament. Benjamin Franklin was very good at arguing, and he was able to get the British to remove some of the taxes on the colonies. Benjamin Franklin had many British friends in London, but after the Boston Tea Party, an angry British Parliament began to distrust and dislike him. And so, in 1775, Franklin decided that it was time to return home, arriving in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, just in time for the second meeting of the Continental Congress. The other representatives were delighted to have someone there who spent so much time on the other side of the ocean. He could help them decide what to do. So because Benjamin Franklin lived in the colonies and in London, he was sort of an inside person. He knew a lot about the colonies, but he also knew a lot about the king. So he was a good person to ask questions. Thomas Jefferson. The Continental Congress decided that they needed to write an official letter to the king announcing that they wanted to be independent. They needed a really good writer, so they asked Thomas Jefferson to help. Thomas Jefferson spent 17 days working hard to make his letter perfect. He had to edit his work and make a few drafts to ensure it would be its best for when the king read it. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was completed and signed by all the members of the Continental Congress. Copies of it were sent all throughout the colonies for everyone to read. The day it was signed is considered America's birthday and is the reason we have a holiday called the 4th of July. So Thomas Jefferson must have been a really good writer. He spent 17 days, and you can see down here, you can see what that letter looked like. This is exactly what the first copy looked like. You can see it looks really different than the writing that we do today. At the bottom, these are all the signatures of the people who wanted to declare that our country would be called the United States of America. Betsy Ross. Betsy Ross was a seamstress in the city of Philadelphia. A seamstress is a person who sews with needle and thread to make or repair things made of cloth. Betsy made clothing for the Patriots as well as different flags for the city. Legend says that George Washington himself visited Betsy and asked her to make a flag to represent the Patriots and the new nation. Betsy got to work on the flag using the colors red, white, and blue. The stars and stripes of the flag incorporate the number 13 in honor of the 13 colonies that were fighting for their freedom. Patriots everywhere use this flag to show their patriotism. We still use a version of this flag today. The difference is that the original flag had 13 stars, but our flag today does not just have 13 stars. Does anyone know how many stars our flag has? Our flag has 50 stars because we have 50 states in the United States of America. All right, now we're going to get into part 2. This is all about how the war ended. The war against the British was long and challenging. The cold winters were difficult and the Patriots had limited money and supplies. However, the Patriots under George Washington's command never gave up. The Patriots received aid from France, who wanted to help the colonists become independent. They sent money and supplies to help the Patriots. It had been 6 years since the war started, and the British commander, General Cornwallis, felt confident that they would defeat the Patriots. Little did he know, 48 ships with soldiers and supplies were on their way from France. George Washington started to create a plan to defeat the Redcoats once and for all. So General Cornwallis, the British commander, he didn't know that the French were going to be coming and helping the Patriots. How do you think George Washington felt when the French ships were on their way? Well, you can see in this picture here that the Patriots were fighting in the winter, in the cold. They didn't have a lot of supplies. They were running out of the things that they needed. They were probably feeling upset. But then when the French were coming to help them, they probably felt really excited and confident that they might be able to beat the British. George thought up a plan. George thought up a plan to trap the British troops. He had the Patriots guard a small town in Virginia called Yorktown. The French ships were going to be arriving there by sea. The British tried to get away from the Patriots, but they were blocked in. The Patriots were blocking the land, and the French were blocking the sea. They were trapped just like George wanted. With nowhere to go, the British troops had to surrender or give up. The Redcoats were captured and the fighting ended. The British soldiers had to return home, and the colonists were now free to rule themselves without the king telling them what to do. So why did the British troops surrender? They had to surrender because there was nowhere for them to go. They probably would have died either way if they had gone the land route or the sea route. So they had to just give up. Just because the war ended did not mean everything would be happily ever after right away. The colonies were having trouble agreeing on anything. They couldn't even agree on what the country's name should be. If they were going to remain a strong country, they would have to figure out a way to govern themselves. The colonies all met again for a large meeting to try to decide how to rule the new nation. The group agreed that George Washington, the leader of the Patriots, was the best person to become the first leader of the country. George was good at helping people agree and work together. Instead of this leader being a king who was born into power, the people would decide the best person for the job and elect a president. That is how George Washington became the first president of the United States of America. So it was different than in England, where the king was just born and the baby would one day become the king, whether they were good or bad or wanted to do it or not. In America, we decided that the people in the country would be able to decide who they wanted to be the president. After the United States became a country, people spent years working through issues of injustice and ensuring that people had equal rights. Women and slaves were still not allowed to vote or own property like the colonial men were. It would take hundreds of years and many more battles and laws to have more equal rights today. Our country is not perfect, and there are still many issues of injustice today. Not all Americans have the equality that they should have. However, if there is anything to take away from the Revolutionary War, it is that you should stand up for what you believe in. If it weren't for the Sons of Liberty taking a stand, America may not exist.